Hey everyone, hope that you are doing well and welcome to the first full episode of my podcast. Yes, he said it with Michael Nevitt. I'm going to be talking about the Percy Jackson TV adaptation, which was just announced that it is going to be coming to Disney Plus. That's something that I'm very excited about. Haven't thought about Percy Jackson in a while, but it was a book series that I was a really big fan of, like I'm guessing many of you back in elementary school and middle school. And I think it has the potential to be a really cool TV show. But didn't like the movies, so I wanted to share my thoughts about what I'm hoping for and what I might expect in this TV show. Um, yeah, I mean, this is definitely, something that I hope that people enjoy. Haven't this is almost unscripted. I have like some bullet points, but we'll see how this goes. Thank you for bearing with me. So, what is Percy Jackson? I'm guessing most of you, if you're watching this, especially, have probably read the books or at least have some familiarity. But basically, it's a five-book series that came out in the late 2000s about a kid named Percy Jackson, who is the son of the Greek god Poseidon. But it takes place in modern day America mostly. It does get a little bit more global. But the gist is so it's like, Greek mythological conflicts, but in the really interesting setting of modern day America, especially New York City. So you have like gods disguised as modern people. You have like monsters in various settings. A lot of famous people throughout history have actually been the sons of gods and goddesses, sons and daughters of gods and goddesses. Yeah, so that's basically the gist. Intended audience probably like 10 on average, 10 age, in terms of age. So what do we know about the TV series that's coming? The first thing is, so it's an adaptation of the original five-book series. There have been some like sequel series and other spin-offs, but I believe it's just going to be those five books. And it's going to be a 5-season series. So I assume that it'll correspond, one book per season. So there was a movie adaptation, as I mentioned. So that was the early 2010s. The first movie was like okay if you're impartial. I was not impartial and did not enjoy it. But the second movie was just like, completely awful. Um, let's see. The author is going to be very involved, unlike the movies. Rick Riordan, which is something that is good because a lot of the he's a book loyalist, obviously, so a lot of the problems with the movie I think would be avoided, because I know that Reardon didn't really like it either. So it's going to be on Disney Plus. It sounds like they're trying to figure out like what is in their intellectual property because they've had a ton of expansion over the past few years and figuring out like what they can actually make into viable franchises. Part of their general expansionism. So what went wrong with the movies? So the characters were aged up. The characters were like probably 16, 17, but that means the actors were probably like 20, something along those lines. But they're supposed to be like 12, something like, so I'm thinking they definitely want the characters and the actors to be younger. I'm thinking like early Harry Potter movies, like, when they're like 11, 12, something like that. I'm thinking that's kind of like the vibe you're going to get and the age of the actors that you're going to get. Obviously, they would age up. There's a year between most of the books, and I assume there's going to be a year between most of the season. So, but they'll be in like, high school, late high school, by the time you get to the final seasons. Which I think it'll be good because, I think that like aging kind of like Harry Potter, and then also you do see like a somewhat similar advancement in themes and stuff like that. I think that'll be something that's interesting. So the cast was pretty well received actually, even though they were way too old. But the script, both like the dialogue itself and the like overarching plot was not good. There were many major deviations in the plot, especially in the second movie, which seems like it tried to cover the entire books 2 through 5. It was not really a good look. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely a big appetite among many people for um, a reboot, which is exciting. That's why I'm doing this. Uh, let's see. So Disney's goal, I figure they want to appeal to nostalgia. Um, you know, as the first movie is like decent to an impartial viewer, so they seem to be going after partial viewers like me. I also think that they'll want to appeal to younger audiences because Percy Jackson is inherently a book for people who, were our age when like 10 years ago, something like that. Um, and so I figure that they'll probably want to like make younger actors, and try to appeal to the, get these people invested, the people who are gonna be 10 in a few years when this comes out. Something I'm thinking about, will people our age have Disney Plus? I mean, I'm guessing that this will probably come out like 2022, 2023 maybe. I mean, there's so much uncertainty though in what the TV streaming world will look like. It's changing so rapidly, and Disney's had a lot of advancements. But the only reason that I have it now is because it's years included on, I think, Verizon. So I'm wondering if people our age, who I guess most of which will be college graduates by that point, will probably not will not necessarily have Disney Plus. So it might be hard to reach those people who are the people who will be nostalgic. And also, I mean, who knows what the economy will look like? Who knows how many young people will have jobs and like disposable income that they could spend on a bunch of different streaming sources? But I mean, maybe Disney will be powerful. I mean, it's consistent though, like with their overall goal of Disney's really trying to take over as much of the IP spaces as they can. They've advanced into Star Wars and Marvel and 20th Century Fox, and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it seems pretty consistent with like trying to breach out and trying to be more than just younger audiences, but also still appealing to their base of like young viewers. So I'm kind of wondering how they'll balance between the two audiences. I mean, obviously 23-year-olds and 10-year-olds are different audiences, going to be looking for different things. So I guess I will explore that question throughout this. So I'm thinking about how coronavirus might affect the production. I'm encouraged that they announced this, just like 2 weeks ago, maybe. Because I could definitely see TV production companies being risk averse during this time. They're not going to be able to film anything for a long time. It's going to be expensive. They're going to have like, they'll need lots of testing. They'll need like tons of money to make sure that anything is safe for a long time. And then there's going to be backlogs and everything. I mean, it seems like it's not the time to start a risky project. So I'm really encouraged that they announce it now. Because if they announced it like a few months ago, I would be concerned that it just like wouldn't pan out. But at the same time, it might hit the market at a right time. I mean, say this comes out 2023 or like a little bit earlier. There might not be a lot of action movies and action TV shows coming out in like 2021 because I could see that being hard to film. So maybe there's a lot of pent up demand for that. So that could be interesting. I was also thinking about the time frame. The books take place in the late 2000s when the series comes out. I was thinking it might take place whenever the TV show is coming out, so like the early 2020s. I think that the setting is just inherently a really important part of this TV show, and it seems like a little bit weird for them to place it in the late 2000s. Like, I assume that they'll have smartphones, they'll have, modern technology, stuff like that. But I also was thinking, like, will they reference the pandemic? Obviously the characters would have been profoundly impacted, and it would be kind of interesting to see how, like, the mythological community is impacted if, I mean, maybe they're all immune or something, but I assume that they're just, I think they won't mention it. Just, like, take place in a world in which this hasn't happened. because I think it would be really off-putting to the nostalgia people, the like 25-year-olds who are like what are you talking about? Percy Jackson did not live through a pandemic. Um I mean, it just seems like they just wouldn't want to wade into that. So some predictions that I was thinking about. So I think there will be about 8 episodes per season. I think that's a pretty good number. And I think they'll be around like 30, 35, maybe 40 minutes each. The Mandalorian, the Star Wars TV show, which I have not finished yet. But I think it's kind of like a similar model as that. I think that also around 8 episodes per season, 30 plus minutes each. I think that that's a pretty good fit. I was a little bit concerned that like this would be weird on TV because there really isn't like a ton of content. I mean, they're only 300 pages each or something like that. But I mean, this is pretty short. Like if you compare this to a Game of Thrones season, Game of Thrones seasons are like 10 hours. What I just proposed is like 4.5 maybe. Um, and I also do think that TV and Percy Jackson, now that I think about it, are a pretty good mix. Even though it's not long, it's highly serialized. Like, there is an overarching story arc, and then like easily chopped up individual episodes. More so than a movie, more so than Harry Potter, for example. Um, I think that they would have a tough time turning Harry Potter into a TV show because there aren't these like easily chopped up segments. But yeah, I mean, I think that it would work well for Percy Jackson. I was thinking about how I would divide the first season based on the first book. So like the first episode could be like setting up and like the first monsters they encounter and then like the arrival at Camp Half Blood. Books 2 and 3 could be about like adjusting to Camp Half Blood, adjusting to mythological life, and then also preparing for the quest that Percy goes on with Grover and Annabeth. And then they're just like highly serialized episodes that happen as they travel across the country. Like the fourth one could be about Medusa and then also travel. I mean, really, all the middle ones are going to be about travel because they travel from New York to Los Angeles. And then encounter various mythological situations along the way. So, like, they encounter Medusa, New Jersey. They could make an episode mostly about that and then travel. Episode 5 would be about, like, St. Louis when they encounter the Chimera. That's a scene that I was disappointed was not in the original movie. Although I do think that the Nashville scene that they included instead was pretty cool. And then also, like, that water park in Denver. That was a weird scene. I don't really remember it that well. I do remember it being really weird, and I was not upset that that did not make it into the movie. But yeah, more traveling cross country, and then 6 is like similar. The time that they spend in like trapped in that casino in Vegas. I thought the movie did a good job with that. I was happy with that. And then also the time that they spend in Los Angeles preparing to go into the underworld. And then like episode 7 could be about their time in the underworld dealing with Hades trying to get the lightning bolt back. You may probably know that it was about the first book was about Percy trying to rescue a stolen lightning bolts that he thought was in the underworld stolen by Hades. And then episode 8 could be like his fight with Ares at the end, and then his time in Olympus, and then like the wrap up, and then the ultimate betrayal by Luke, the guy who ends up siding with Kronos. Spoiler. But yeah, I mean, so I don't have that set out for all the books, but books 2, 3, and 4 are pretty similar to that, where you could create that kind of like serial narrative. They all involve long travels with like, interruptions, and then they like deal with it, and then, like enough to make an episode exciting, but also self-contained, and then they move on and do something else. So I think that this is actually a really good format for that. Season 5, though, I am very concerned about because that season is very much built for a movie. That's like the end battle, when it's like the ultimate fight between the Camp Half-Blood demigod forces and the Kronos Titan forces. And like half the book, probably maybe more, is battle. So that would mean 4 episodes of at least half an hour each. And it's a pretty encompassing battle. Like, I mean, maybe they could really beef up the stuff that happens before. Like, they do go to the underworld again, and they have, like an adventure on a cruise ship. But, like, the real, like, beef of that is the battle. And even, like, Game of Thrones, spoilers for season 8. Skip ahead, like, a minute if you haven't seen that and want to. But even, like, the Game of Thrones battle in season 8, the big one, against the White Walkers was only an hour, and this would have to be at least like 2 hours just to make it a ratio of like content in that season to the length of the TV show. I mean, there is a lot going on, but like, I don't know. Are you gonna spread a battle over 4 episodes? That just seems weird. Like that really is like a movie. That's like a Deathly Hallows Part 2 kind of movie. I would be interested in seeing how that happens. I also don't think this will be like the hugest budget. I mean, it's not. They're not going to rival Game of Thrones for creating the largest battle ever. Even though they would kind of have to make this a TV show. I'm interested in seeing how that works out. They might have some logistical troubles, but I also think it has the potential to be really cool because that is just like a really cool battle that happens at the end of this series, and that like sums up everything very well. All across New York. Let's see. So outside of that. Something else I was thinking about, there might be some sort of like flashback, maybe narration style narrative. Something that is really important in the books is Percy is talking in first person and in past tense too, and he has a lot of inside jokes with the audience, and I think that's something that they might want to include. So the way the Kane Chronicles did it, which is the same author but like the Egyptian series, they made a recording of it after after the adventures, and this was like them telling it. So maybe they'll do something like that. Maybe they'll just do like voiceover narration. I think this might actually help appeal to younger viewers. I think older viewers might find it a little bit corny, but we'll see. But yeah, I mean, I think that they will find a way definitely to make the endearing quips and inside jokes that are so signature to this series, and such an important part. I mean, they're just like a lot of really funny random lines, that I would enjoy looking back at. Something else I'm thinking about: will they treat stuff as spoilers? Like Game of Thrones, for example, is very like has a lot of like really interesting plot points that they try to keep hidden and then spring as stuff that like will eventually be treated as spoilers. Or will they assume that most of their audience is already pretty familiar and like sets it up in a way that is accompanying that? Like the ultimate betrayal by Luke at the end of the first book / the end of the first series. Like, are they going to try to make that be like a big spoiler, or will they assume that a lot of their audience is already familiar with that and then like play that up? That it could be interesting. I'm gonna talk a little bit more about Luke, I believe, a little later. Something else I was thinking about: special effects. So they have to look pretty good. I mean, like it's an action film. It's a like mythology film. They have to look pretty good. I don't think they have to look blockbuster though. I mean, it is a TV show. The movie was like incredibly shiny, you could say. Just like a lot of like random like explosions and whatever, and like big like battle sequences. I don't think they need this for this TV show. I mean, maybe a little bit at the end, but more like Mandalorian level, where it's like, high quality picture and stuff like that, but it doesn't have the same flash as a lot of the, Rise of Skywalker, for example. And maybe like early Harry Potter is a similar vibe. They have a lot of magic in that, obviously, but it's not like blockbuster special effects the same way. So obviously it would be better tech than the early Harry Potter movies, which was 20 years before this came out. Wow, we're old. Definitely still look good. But yeah, I mean, I think it could be distracting and also just too high budget to have too good special effects. On the other hand, season 5 should be like expensive and really good. I think that hopefully the money will scale up by like season 4 and 5 when they need that. But yeah, I mean, that happens. Like Game of Thrones wasn't able to shoot battle sequences in the first season because they just couldn't afford it. And then season 8, they created the largest battle ever in fiction. So also they need more colors. It was like a very bland color palette, I remember. And also more distinctive monsters. I was looking back at all the monsters from the first movie in Google Images. They all look the same. They all were like dark gray. And I think the monsters themselves are really unique, and they need to, do more than just like make them gray. I think that they have a lot of potential there. And I think that could be really cool. And also just create it, like make a little bit lighter of an atmosphere. Obviously you're dealing with like killer monsters, but I think it could still be a fun TV show. I don't think it was necessarily that fun as a movie. It was more just like blockbuster actiony. I think the settings too are going to be really key. The movie did a good job of this, I believe, or at least decent job. But I mean, the whole point is that like it's this ancient setting, or this like ancient traditions, but it's set in this extremely modern American scope, set in like an extremely modern American environment. And I think, especially considering there's so much travel that goes on in most of these books, they need a sense of scope and of geography. I think that that's something that they could definitely have, but like, they go to St. Louis and then like find out like what the mythological stuff is going on there. They go to DC and like go to the Smithsonian. They go to the Hoover Dam. Like they travel across the country, and like I think where they are is really important. And so I hope they do a good job of that. And then my last bit, I'm going to talk about what I'm looking for in the characters. So Percy, obviously he's the main character, Percy Jackson. I think he should be scrappy in this, kind of like, to go back to this early Harry Potter. He was like, he started as a superhero basically in the first movie. And you see this in like the end fight that he had. I don't think that should be what we're looking for. He needs to like come into a superhero status. By like the sequel series, he's like an all-time legendary figure, but like he's just some kid at the beginning. I think that that's important. So he should be like kind of shortish and scrappy and not like super muscular or large or anything like that. I think it should also be conspicuous that he's had like a tough go at life. He transferring schools all the time. He doesn't have like that stable of a home situation. So I think he should like come across as like kind of not that well adjusted. Grover, who is his sidekick, who's a half goat satyr. So I think they'll want to prevent Ron comparisons from Harry Potter, because I have been making this reference a lot. They do have to make it unique. He came across as weird in the movies. I don't know if anyone remembers this. I have a really vivid memory of Grover giving money to the guy Charon maybe, who guards the underworld, and like gave like a few $100 American, and then this guy like burns it up, and then he's like, we're in a recession, because it did come out in 2010. But it just seemed really weird for Grover. Anyway, I think that he came across as weird in the movies maybe. So I don't think they want to do that. I think that Grover has like some distinct features, but he's not that out there. He's like pretty mainstream. He's pretty shy. He's like kind of a hippie in some ways. I don't think that they want to do what they did in the movies. I think they want to give him a distinct personality, but also have him be really dutiful to Percy and to his overall mission. I think that that's something that's going to be important. Annabeth. So, the third really important young character in this movie, or in this TV series. So, first of all, she has to be blonde. Really distinctive part of her in the book series, and something that the first movie did not do for some reason. And then they dyed her hair for the second movie just to like address it. It was really weird. She also should not be played by a supermodel. She was played by a supermodel, I believe, in the movies. I don't think that that's the vibe that they're going for. They want younger people. They want like 12-year-olds at this point. I also think she should be like effortlessly smart. I mean that's really distinctive. I don't think that she should like need to really show it off that much. Like I guess Hermione kind of showed it off, but I think that she just like has the pure natural intelligence of being the daughter of Athena, and I think that they need to let that shine in a way that's like not that conspicuous. Just like part of her. I think that that's something that would be interesting. She also came across as like pretty crazy in the movies, like pretty violent. I think partly is because they didn't have the character of Clarice, in the movies, in the first movie at least, and they kind of had to absorb Annabeth into her. They're definitely, I really hope, yeah, I mean they'll have Clarice in the TV series all the way through. So I think that they want to create her as a little more normal, a little more likable, and as like a fun, or a really fun character in some ways, but also retain her distinct personalities of being resourceful and smart, and the brains behind the operation. Clarice, daughter of Ares. First of all, she needs to be in the TV series. Still don't get why she wasn't in the movie. Still a little bit mad about that. I think the second movie actually did do a decent job of dealing with her, even though she wasn't even introduced in the first movie. She does become like much more important in the second movie and in the second book and movie, and then like beyond that. I think that they could use like kind of standard bully tropes of like boarding school type, even though this is a camp. Like not that different from Malfoy, not this necessarily, like not that different from, I guess like Divergent is another example. I mean like we've all seen so many series, like I guess Riverdale probably has a lot of them, but like definitely needs to retain the violence and aggression that she is known for, but also make her like a little bit likable in some ways. I think it's also unique because in a lot of stuff like that, she was never really like the big bad, because we know from the beginning that like what kind of things Percy's dealing with. Unlike in Harry Potter, for example, like Harry doesn't really have a ton to worry about in the first book, other than like what Malfoy is doing. I think a lot of other. I'm thinking about like The Ranger's Apprentice. I don't know if any of you have read that, but like the main character in that had to deal with the bully in the first half of the first book before turning attention to like the broader like national crises that was going on in that series. Like Divergent 2, it like wasn't always that clear like what Triss was doing when she had to deal with the bully characters, but like they never had that in Percy Jackson. Like Clarice was never more than an annoyance because like you knew what was going on, and they didn't spend that long at Camp Half-Blood in the first book. So I don't think they have to build her up that much in the first season. She becomes much more important, obviously, in season 2, so that creates a lot of room for character development, kind of have her as, like, a blank slate in some ways, but, like, still make her a compelling villain, but also leave her room to eventually redeem herself and be an anti-hero in a lot of ways. I think that is important. Luke, on the other hand, son of Hermes, and ultimate traitor to the Half-Blood cause, and one of the main villains, and also a bit of an anti-villain in that he wasn't like a pure villain, but like a really important antagonist for most of this series. So his introduction here I think is going to be really key. I don't think the movie did it all that great. I kind of want to get at his like intrinsic motivations, his really interesting backstory. I don't remember exactly in what order they revealed the details of his upbringing and his time with Talia and Annabeth back before he came to Camp Half-Blood. But I do want to get at the motivation a bit in the first season, and then like talk about why he does the betrayal. It's not just like he's power hungry, it's he's fed up and manipulated and all that stuff. I do kind of want to see nice like bonding scenes between him and Annabeth. I think that that's an important part of their relationship that we're not going to get in any real sense other than flashbacks beyond this, because they're still amicable for the first season at least. I think he could be like a big brotherly type. I kind of want to look up to him. I kind of want the characters to look up to him. He should be like, maybe 16 or so, maybe like 18 as an actor. Um, I think um, I don't want to do what they did in the Star Wars prequels when like everyone knew Palpatine was the villain because everyone had seen the sequel series or the not the original trilogy, and they like just didn't disguise that this guy was the traitor. I want new viewers to be shocked because I want them to like look up to this guy and like respect this guy. I also think older viewers should be like dreading it instead of like, um, yeah. I think that that would be an interesting dynamic as opposed to like just thinking about him as bad the whole time. I kind of want to watch the first season and like kind of like him. I'm thinking about Westworld. I don't want to spoil that because a lot of there are some interesting twists, but like there are plenty of characters who, I mean, one in particular that I'm thinking about that I really don't like. Is two that I'm thinking about that like in future seasons in like seasons 2 and 3 are really bad characters in terms of like, but you watch season 1 and I still like them even though I know what they do in future seasons. I want that in this show, even though like a lot of the audience is going to already be expecting and like think about Luke in his like old like broader villain role. I want to give him time to become scary. I think that that would be really interesting. Um, Now I want to talk about some of the gods, and then we'll wrap up. They don't have huge roles, but interesting roles for sure and powerful ones. And a lot of people have been advocating to having like pretty famous actors and actresses play. I haven't heard that many like specific examples of what they're looking for. I think that would be cool. Um, they also it seems like want to bring back some of the original demigod actors to play gods from the original movies. I think that that could be cool. Like Logan Lerman, who played Percy as Poseidon, I could get behind that. But I was thinking Zeus. So he's like powerful. He's low key flexing, but he doesn't need to. I think that that's something that's really important. He doesn't have to be like that imposing or intimidating because he's Zeus. He's just like it's like in the job description. So I was thinking Jude Law when he plays Dumbledore in the Fantastic Beasts franchise in the second movie. I think he does a really good job of that. In just like, Jude Law, you could look up an image of him. He's not like that. He's not terrifying, but he's Dumbledore, and he plays Dumbledore with the gravitas of like, everyone respects Dumbledore. I think that he would actually be a pretty good fit for this. Sean Bean, I watched this one of the scenes to like practice for this with Zeus and Poseidon. Sean Bean was actually Zeus, which I didn't realize. He was pretty good, even though he had a terrible script. I think that that's kind of a similar role in some ways, although more aggressive to like Ned Stark, for example. Like people respect Ned Stark, not just from Game of Thrones, not just because he's like physically intimidating. Although you like do understand he has the power, but like he just like carries a room. He doesn't need to be as scary as like Tywin Lannister or Stannis Baratheon, really intimidating Game of Thrones characters. I'm thinking like there's a quote from Tywin Lannister: "Any man who must say I am the king is no true king." I think that that's something that's really important and interesting. I think Zeus does not need to say I am the king. I don't think he needs to wear a crown to be powerful, and I think we need an actor who can like carry the room even without being like, really conspicuously the strongest person in the room, because that they're the king. They don't need to say I am the king. Poseidon, on the other hand, I view kind of similarly. I was thinking Jason Momoa, who plays Aquaman. Maybe that's just a little bit too on the nose, but I think he would be a good fit. He plays Khal Drogo in Game of Thrones, but like an isolated fisherman guy. Like I could see like a big beard, tanned out me. I should play Poseidon. Yeah, like kind of a loner. I think Jason Momoa. Now that I think about it, would be good. Or maybe like the guy who played Finnick from The Hungarians. Maybe I'm just thinking of people who are associated with water, but like, you underestimate him at your own risk. Like it's somewhat similar. Like, it's clear that he's powerful, but like you could underestimate him, but also like, he's clearly like pretty dangerous. Um, so Hades, is the villain for most of the first season. So what I learned is Rosario Dawson actually plays Persephone. And so maybe she should reprise that role, and then her real life partner Cory Booker could play Hades. I think that would be a really interesting dynamic. But yeah, no, I mean, I think you want someone who's human and relatable. You don't necessarily have that much in the show, or sorry, in the original movie. He's just like kind of supposed to be terrifying, but I think you want someone who's like pretty easy to humanize, especially because looking forward at Hades, like Hades does come in the clutch for the good guys, a few seasons later, a few books later, and he was also just misunderstood. So I think you want someone who's human and relatable, but also, I mean, he's still Hades. He's the god of the underworld. He has to be scary. And I think part of it has to be a performance. He's performing scary because that's what he's been shoehorned in for all of his existence. He's been shoehorned in as the god of the underworld, and he needs to play up that role. But also, we need to be scared of him as an audience, especially those of us are, viewers who don't yet know that he does become, like, rehabilitated in some ways. Someone I was thinking about, maybe Jeffrey Wright, who plays Bernard Lowe in Westworld, and also Beatty in the Hunger Games. I mean, those are both obviously much nerdier characters than Hades, but I think that he's a wide range of things that he could do. I think that this is something that he could pull off. Or maybe just like someone with similar vibes of like, could like when you see him, he's not actually as like scary as you think. Like someone who you think has like a deep interior, but like is also clearly terrifying. But also some of it is just performance. I think that's important. Ares needs to be in this TV series. That's important. Unlike in the original movie. Dwayne Johnson, I think, is the only acceptable answer. I think that would be really fun to watch Dwayne Johnson and like whatever like 13-year-old is playing Percy. Like watching them fight would be really fun. But yeah, I mean someone who's like really built up, really imposing, has or like is played as really aggressive, played as like kind of terrifying, but also like maybe they bite, just like maybe their bark is a little bit worse than their bite, but also like hot-headed. I think Dwayne Johnson would be really perfect. It might be a little bit too. He might be a little too big of an actor for this role. I did not think about how I'm going to conclude this, but yeah, I think that this has the potential to be a really interesting series. And now that I've been thinking about it more, I'm excited for it, which is a little disappointing because it's going to come out in like 2 to 3 years. But it should be interesting. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I know that this went a little bit longer than the 30 minutes I had set aside, but I'm glad because it only took me like a little bit more than an hour to do this prep work. And it's not a topic that I'm as familiar with as I assume most of the other things I'm going to be talking about. And so next week, I'm still going to try to do weekly as much as possible. Next week, Pennsylvania primary, and also Maryland primary, and a few other primaries going on that week. So switching to politics for the next week, because there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on at that time. I'm going to want to talk about that. I also just got the new Hunger Games book, the Hunger Games prequel. Haven't started reading that. I think I will start tonight. But that is definitely something that I'm interested in talking about. If it is interesting, if it's worth talking about. Yeah, well, thank you so much for watching. Drop a like and a comment and a subscription. And talk to you soon. Thank you for tuning in. I hope that this was enjoyable. Please let me know if you have comments, if you have your own thoughts about what you're looking for in the Percy Jackson TV series, or you have thoughts about what kind of topics I should do going forward. I would appreciate that. Talk to you soon.